a client yesterday. He's had low back pain, and everything's pointing to his right side now. Have you ever seen it where the right side isn't the problem? That's just potentially the bit that's getting overloaded or overworked or whatever it is, and it's actually been the other side.
Yep. Yeah, we see some very strange things. That's why I encourage people to take the samples and see what the body tells you and go with that, instead of hanging on to that dogma that it's on the right side. It's got to be something wrong with your right side. We've got to find something with your right side. And not being surprised that it could be somewhere else. Yeah, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I think anything that this can teach us is how can we go about doing this and doing the sample sets in a remote setting.
Yeah, that's the real. Yeah, if that can be figured out in a way without having to do that perturbation to check quality, that would be amazing. Now that perturbation really is an important tool to discover, quality output issues, independent of sensation or range, right? Bilateral asymmetry and range of motion or limb or trunk motion. Because the way the number of ways the system can use its capabilities gives it such a wide array of its own tools that it's hard to find which part of it is problematic, right? Like, is it the endurance side? You don't see any asymmetry in motion at the, like, say, the extremities, right? The lower extremity. You're like, I looked at the hips and the knees and the ankles and the toes, and everything looks bilaterally symmetrical as far as range of motion. I did the QMAMC and right and left legs and a bunch of configurations. I didn't see anything there. We did strength output, in 30 or 60 second interval, and we didn't see any big asymmetries there. But then you do an endurance thing, right? Like, let's do an isometric hold on your right hip abductor and see how long you can hold it before you get to voluntary fatigue. And then we'll do the left hip abductor, however you do the configuration, and have you hold it up to voluntary fatigue with maybe an ankle weight or something if you want. And after 90 seconds, the right one is done. They stop and they tell you, yeah, man, my right leg I can't hold it up anymore. Then they go to do the left one, and they can do the left one for 4 minutes. And you're like, what the heck, right? And they're like, yeah, I don't even hardly feel my left hip that much. My right hip was just burning. I had to stop at 90 seconds, but my left hip felt like I can hold it up forever. And who would know? How would you know that there was some kind of endurance issue? And there was the other issue. It didn't really show up in any other way the body can express itself, through absolute force output, through displacement, through strength. You wouldn't find it, right? And if they were running or a walker, or they were a swimmer or whatever they were, and they were using their legs, putting both lower extremity muscular systems, through the same volume and intensities, well, the right hip area is telling you, at least in one direction, we can't go as long as the other one.
Mhm.
And it has a lower fatigue threshold. You have to keep searching, right? Now, whether or not we can figure out, well, maybe we start with one of those instead of starting with, the QMAMC and working in the ATP PC or anaerobic glycolytic phase. We start with the endurance side, right? And we say, let's go to aerobic glycolysis for these tissues and see what happens. And maybe that's a way to find something. So I don't know. It's a tough. The longer I'm doing this, the more I realize how many ways the system can have a problem, right? And all. So that's the thing. That's the problem with sensation, is we don't always understand the cause, right? So this person goes for a run, and they come back and they're like, I don't know. After my runs, man, my left low back just really bothers me, right? And then it goes away, and then I run again, and my left low back goes away, starts to bother me, and then I rest and it goes away. And everyone's like, what's going on, right? Let's look at the low back, let's look at the left side, right? And could it have been the entire time this low fatigue threshold for the right hip area, the right hip musculature? And even wide. Is it the non-dominant side? Was there an injury history? Is it something occupationally that they're doing, right? Pretty wild.
If you were to put a number on the amount of ways that you think the system, or the brain, or whatever you want to call it, can manage the body, is it infinite?
It certainly is a lot of options. That's what, Bertholz and those guys, those neurophysicists, that's what they'd say. That's the problem for the brain, is because it has nearly an infinite number of capabilities and degrees of freedom and combinations and control of inertial segments. How does it do this moment to moment? And it clearly has some kind of, I don't want to say shortcuts, but internal way of managing all of that. But yeah, when you look at the muscle system specialist content, there's a couple of pages in there where, I'm kind of showing the energy substrate utilization and recovery rates, the link tension and torque profile, right? And, giving you the basic schema that the system has to work with, the degrees of freedom, the physics side of it. So, fundamentally, right? Contraction, maintain length, contraction, change length, shortening, contraction, change length, or change joint angle, lengthening. And then the 10 or so varieties we currently try to define, let alone, what's the plyometric fatigue threshold? How many times can the tissue contraction lengthen before it fatigues versus contraction shorten? They're not the same. Do you need the contraction lengthening to have the same endurance threshold on both sides? Yeah. So that's why I keep coming back, interestingly enough, to this bilateral symmetry thing as a pretty good reference for locating potential motor output issues against the backdrop of historical injury, genetic things, occupational problems, right? Hand dominance. But what I've been reading and studying about symmetry in biology, and the real benefit of it, because it's a conserved feature of almost every living creature on the planet that moves around its environment. It's bilaterally symmetric or radially symmetric, right? And there are sound physics reasons for that. And the lower extremity, I don't know, I think was I talking about this with you last week, a couple weeks ago? Or maybe not. Looking at the motor output, like we talk about contralateral, right? central pattern generator activity, right? This seems to be an internal, genetically expressed network connectivity. That when the baby gets up and sees other creatures bigger than it and walking around, it wants to walk around, and it doesn't think to itself, I must swing my arm and leg contralaterally. It doesn't think that. It just starts walking, and that pattern emerges, right? Okay, so that seems intrinsic somehow. Well, that's an expression of bilateral symmetry in a sense, and bilateral symmetry is necessary for the expression of a central pattern generator for ambulation. Well, I started thinking about the legs and the arms, and I'm thinking, well, if you're upright ambulatory, your legs are taking the cues from each other off what the other leg is doing or not doing. Because if you were to lose a leg, can your motor output governing system use the remaining leg the same way it did when there was two legs? No. No. You switch from a bilateral walking motor output to a hopping output, right? Totally different way to use the leg. And so I thought, there has to be a sub-program or something that when I'm walking on my two legs, somehow whatever my left leg is doing, my right leg is somehow aware of it, has to be made aware of it, because it's trying to make predictions and actions based on what the left leg is doing or not doing. Where the upper extremity, it doesn't have to do that. I could lose an arm and my other arm works the same way it did before. But I can't lose a leg and have my other leg work the same way it did before. Which again is why we spend so much time and energy and billions of dollars trying to do what when someone loses a leg?
Get to walk again.
Make another one for them, right? We need to make you another leg, right? So you can walk upright bipedally, because it seems to be, again, so axiomatic and fundamental to the system's expressive output and what it can do to move about its environment.
Do you think that's because it's obviously that we've got the psychology of, when we come to that, say someone loses their leg, the psychology is that we want to help you resume your normal life as possible, or as close to as possible. Do you think there's a like an intrinsically driven strategy where we want to do that, because if we don't, then the downstream effect of not being upright and walking about is obviously things like you lose muscle mass, you essentially start to die as soon as you stop being able to ambulate.
Yep, it gets attached back to that idea of our fundamental survival is based on our ability to move about our environment, and the more efficient we can do that, the higher probability of survival we have. There's just no question about that.
Motor control, again, motor output.
It just seems to come back to that all the time. Every time I go in a direction, I'm like, it seems to come back to this idea of how the quality and ability of our system's governance over its material and structural construct, the way that it's built, it's fundamental. And incrementally moving away from that is an incremental move away from health and wellness and quality of life. Now, what the cutoff is, how much asymmetry in what domain is noticeable to the organism, or becomes noticeable or detectable to a decline in its health, wellness, and functionality, I don't know. I'm not sure how to measure that in a quantitative way. Sure, it could be. If we could measure the energy, the thermodynamic properties, we could probably come up with a cutoff score of a couple percentage points or whatever.
So when you're sort of applying this to a client, is that your initial goal? Is can we get them moving about better? Like the initial driving goal is just can we get them moving about better, and then working off that.
Yes, and having them feel that they have to know that, right? It doesn't do me much good or them for me to say I think you're moving better if they don't think so or don't feel that, right? I mean, they're the ones that feel their body when they get out of a chair.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's why you have to check in with them. I mean, how do you like the way your body's feeling when you use it under different conditions? And then the fundamental objective is important because that kind of defines the means ends analysis and helps define the path a little bit. Like for someone like you, it'd be a different process. You want to be you want to use your motor system at very high levels under high demands, right? And high energetic excursions, higher risk levels for the materials, right? So, there'd be a different process. But for somebody who just wants to be able to walk, go shopping, go to the park, play with their grandkids, right? Keep their house clean, go on a cruise, that's a different process. They don't need hanging cleans or walking down the street with dumbbells over their head, lunging. They don't need that. So why would I do that?
Yeah. There's a whole fitness movement kind of built on the idea of the opposite of that.
Well, yeah, it's just like, what the heck, and again, those are risks that person doesn't need to take.
Is it like my thinking again, it's CrossFit. With that it would be great if the 85-year-old was able to do that safely.
Would be amazing.
That'd be great. That's kind of like, yeah, but I think I don't know if what they're trying to say is that it doesn't necessarily mean that they need that. Like their version of doing hang cleans might be just standing up out of the chair. That's their
right.
Yeah. So
it's about risk.
That can be sometimes, yeah. Risk.
Yeah. So we get back to the risk management idea. Why am I taking these risks? The higher torques, the higher volumes, the more complex demand on managing the degrees of freedom, you're putting the system at higher risk for injuring it. There's no doubt about this.
Yeah.
So the question is, what do we need these risks? Because the consequence of an injury to an 85-year-old is a big difference than a 25-year-old who gets injured.
Yeah.
85-year-old gets injured, we're going to have a hard time coming back from that. And that's really going to shut them down and the quality of life they want. 25-year-old, they'll do the rehab and they'll bounce back and they'll be probably okay, right?
Yeah. It's making me think of the client that you had when, I keep forgetting her name, older lady, I can barely stand up without wobbling about. You got just doing some ankle circles.
Yeah. She's doing good. She's out of significant pain now. She's moving around. She's doing good.
Yeah. Oh,
yep.
Wow. It's crazy. She was on death's door. She was knocking.
Couldn't lift her leg off the table. Couldn't lay down flat. She could, all of that stuff.
How's she doing with that sort of basic stuff now?
Yeah. I mean, she has significant joint OA in her knees and her lumbar spine is, but she doesn't need to be doing hanging cleans and snatches and burpees and all this stuff, right? She just wants, she owns a furniture store. She wants to be able to, work in the store and move the furniture around and not be in pain and, go shopping. That's what she wants.
Yeah, I think I've had a conversation with my coaches is about how small a dose of exercise you can actually give, and that a squat is still relatively quite a high dose of exercise for a lot of people, for general population. And like you said, just doing some circle ankle rotations was enough exercise for her. And I think what I'm trying to get across to my coaches and get through to myself is that is still classed as exercise. That's not reserved. It seems to be that we get to like a certain level of exercise and then it automatically becomes therapy and you're in the realms of therapy now. I think actually, no, we're not.
No.
We're still in the realms of exercise.
Just stimulating your system in a low risk way to help it, govern itself better. That's what we're doing, so, okay. Yep. Yeah. She comes in every week and gets a little stronger and gets a little better and moves around better. And we can add a little bit and she's happy, not going backwards.
Is she still doing the other therapy?
Not as much.
It's crazy.
Because she was only doing it to manage her pain, right? Well, she's not in that much pain anymore. So she doesn't really need that anymore. Right? So
out there's a few homeopathic therapists out there that are cursing your name right now. Probably. I had a great cash cow there, kept coming back to me. I think that's the biggest difference between this approach in the muscle system is about actually trying to get you out of pain and keep you out of it. Whereas it seems to be that all other therapy-based models are based on just managing your pain and never really actually getting you out of it. There's no, I don't want you to come back. It's keep coming back. And it seems to be that all therapy is based around that idea is I need you to keep coming back because it's a business model at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's not really about saying, no, I'm going to get you fixed so that you never come back. That's the idea.
Showing her what she can do on her own to manage this, right? Found some movements that she could do, and she can do them on her own. Doesn't cost her any money, and she can manage her own system. That's empowering because once the system gets into a place where it's filled with anxiety and doubt about its own capabilities, and it gets filled with uncertainty, and now you're filled with hesitation. Well, that creates a whole nother layer of control problem. And so just restoring her confidence in her ability to manage this on her own has helped her tremendously. It took her out of a place where she thought, I'm going down the drain here. How am I going to get out of this? This is my new normal. This is terrible.
Yeah, I think that's a big wake-up call. It's kind of what I've been trying to, in terms of my message I've been putting out there on my social medias and things, is that if anything, this whole situation that the world's in at the moment has taught us in the realm of fitness is that you need to be able to do this yourself. You can't rely on the gym and the class instructor. And even in these Zoom online classes that everyone's doing now, that even that's not going to be good enough because the minute that the internet goes down, you're screwed. I dropped off a kettlebell yesterday and to a friend, and they were outside and they just looked distraught, and I asked them why. They were like, I can't go to my boot camp class. I can't go to my PT. I don't know what to do. Like, how long have you been going? Oh, 15 years. 15 years and you don't know what to do? Can you imagine saying to someone, oh, I've been in first grade for 15 years. I still don't know how to spell my name. That sounds ludicrous.
It's crazy. It is ludicrous, man. Don't know what to do.
It's perfectly normal.
Yep.
Yeah, it's the media isn't helping us either at the moment, especially in the UK. We're just seen as a joke. They just view us as this absolute joke of an industry. It's frustrating. Just jump about for a bit, do some. You're 50 years old. Just jump about. That'll do it.
Jumping
Go out for a
jacks.
run as hard as you can if you've only got 10 minutes. Really? Ugh. Maybe let's just start with a walk. If that. Yeah.
Well, maybe
Crazy.
we can do a series on that. We can start talking about that.
Mm.
All right. Well, I think I'm going to go ahead and get a little workout in.
Yeah, go for it. You got the time now, my friend.